Welcome to Star Wars on High. Happy Thursday night. Ben, as that intro is playing, there is the ability for us to make like our own custom intros. We've got to do
Right.
something with like some
Yeah.
gonks walking on the stage and falling over or something like
That's an idea.
wild. I love that countdown timer as much as I do. I think we could step up our game. But thank you
Definitely.
guys for stopping by. We're down Jimmy. Jimmy is sick once again. It's just been a bad year for Jimmy in sickness. This is probably the third time he's had a stomach bug. Right now he's got a cough. So he is mending. Maybe we'll see him stop by in the chat if he's awake at this point and he can contribute via chat. But Ben, it looks like you got some sun. How was your holiday weekend? How are you doing this week?
My son was very, very retrospective. As I was baking in the sun on Jersey Shore Beach, I was thinking of those moments between Kenobi and Anakin that passed over in Mustafar. I'm like, God damn it. Now I know how he feels.
You were empathizing with Anakin.
After you get like a minor sunstroke, suddenly Kenobi's words begin to sound more and more grating. And like your life becomes more like a retrospect on Star Wars. Like, oh my God, I get it now. Eureka. I feel
Yeah.
it.
Hey.
No, but I had a pretty good time. Basically, a family's friend drove us to Jersey Shore Beach. We had a good time. We had a good food. Just enjoying our time. For us as Russian American immigrants, like it's you got to go an extra mile and recognize that you embrace the country and you embrace all the holidays. That 4th of July is indeed one of our biggest holidays, right? It's Christmas and 4th of July.
Yeah.
So you got to pay tribute to what it represents, have a good time, say congratulations to all the people. It was fun times, man. How about you?
It's true. I too spent 4th of July with family. And I will tell you predominantly the family I was with are first generation, immigrated to the United States, and they celebrate 4th of July way bigger than even, my family did as it's just funny how that is, right? So it's funny you say that. It lines right up with kind of my experience as well on the 4th of July. But it was a great time. It is extremely hot throughout the middle of the country. So if you're anywhere near me, you are getting crispy in the outdoors. So happy to be inside talking Star Wars tonight. And we have quite a few things I want to discuss. It's a little bit of a slower news period. I talked about this a little bit earlier in a video I made this week. We're in a lull right now, right? We just had a lot going on in May. But I do want to say, when August gets here, we're about to really ramp up. Let me just walk through it. Andor, which we're going to discuss tonight, is going to get us kicked off in August. We have Tales of the Jedi, some new animated shorts. We have the Bad Batch Season 2, something Ben and I are extremely excited for.
Yep.
We have, of course, more High Republic novels, an entire new phase, a new wave of books coming to us in the fall. And then, we'll get hit with more Mandalorian in February. So once August hits, it's just going to be a bunch of Star Wars stuff. So we are in a little bit of a lull right now, which allows us to kind of reflect on some of the stuff that's come. And also, as you guys see from the background, see from the title, we're going to talk about some books, specifically Shadow of the Sith, to probably get us kicked off tonight as well. So it has been kind of a good time to maybe take a breath, take a little step back, catch up. We had a really busy May and June, and now we can kind of take a little breather in July before Andor hits us in August. It's so close. Can you believe we're getting another Star Wars show in about 6-7 weeks now? It feels like we just wrapped up Kenobi.
It's kind of surreal, man.
I mean, Disney, say what you want about Disney, right? They certainly know how to keep the IV going with content, right? Not even mentioning the fact that there are, if you're a big Marvel fan, for example, Thor comes out tonight. So you got that you watched too. I think the Miss Marvel show, if you watched, ended yesterday. I mean, they know the formula to keep you constantly going, constantly watching and consuming their content. So, hey,
Josh, let me ask you this question very, very quickly.
Yeah.
You constantly hear this debate, when Disney took over, they're in it for the money, they're milking the cow, so to speak. But you and I both know that from day one, when George Lucas conceived it, right, with the original A New Hope, and 2 weeks after that, he insisted that he gets the right to all the merchandising. What was new that Star Wars is all about that merch? So the question is, picture George at the helm right now, 2022, right? He still owns Star Wars. Do you think with the technological advancements and the availability of streaming media where things have pushed, which is a radically different space than when he was releasing the Clone Wars, do you think we would have had as much Star Wars content under George?
That's actually interesting. I mean, I tend to believe no, just because he seemed to understand, even though you guys know I'm a big fan of the quantity of Star Wars content.
Mhm.
I'm fine with what we're getting. I really enjoy the frequent releases. I do think George understood the value of time, as in using it to your creative advantage, and
Mm,
allowing your product to kind of breathe before
mm,
releasing the next wave. Whether he did that intentionally or not, it worked so successfully. Successfully. The hype was very much there for the prequel trilogy when they were announced,
right.
and so he I think really used that time well. And it is actually kind of interesting to think about if George would ever, with today's technology and today's streaming model, would put out more content. I just can't imagine it. I can't see him being like a very frequent,
Mm,
constant content creator. He strikes me as someone who has a story he wants to tell, and he tells it,
right.
and frankly doesn't maybe care even if it's well received, as we saw with the prequel trilogy. So
Right. Right.
I don't know if he would do as well. I don't want to say do well, because I still think he can make good content. I just don't
Mhm.
know if this kind of space of constant shows and movies would really fit his personal, temperament. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts there, Ben?
Yeah, I definitely do. You think I'm thinking quite the opposite, because George, we also know, right, from the history, especially, was very much illuminated and very in front of us as the prequels were coming out, because we got a lot of documentaries, the behind the scenes as the movies were coming out in theaters. We got a lot of comparative mythology kind of documentaries on History Channel, different George Lucas interviews, and it almost felt to me that he was not only a great storyteller, but he was the man that was always at the forefront of technology and saying, okay, I want
Yes.
to innovate here. I want to push this medium. I want to basically just hear him talk about the Clone Wars show, how he was describing it on a technical level, not just the canvas
Yeah.
of it, the kind of story he wanted to tell, right? And it begs the question, if George, the puppet master, right, he owns this franchise and he has all these avenues available to him, I honestly feel that he would have gone for it. And once he set up the proper channels and proper standard of quality, like, hey, I have an animated show running, right? And then, hey, by the way, I think I'm going to go for the live action show now. Boom, let this go over here. You know what? I think the Lucasfilm games can up their ante and publish more games under my kind of like
Hmm.
indirect control.
Stewardship.
Maybe
Yeah.
I can write a script here or two, let them continue there. And I think he would have completely exploited that.
We were talking before the stream, and I started playing this now. They're doing a documentary around a lot of the technology they're using. It's called Light and Magic, and it's specifically following industrial lights and magic and all the films they've worked on. And you could see right there the beginning, and right now, George Lucas is going to be part of that documentary and explaining how Star Wars was made. And so it flows in really well with what you're talking about, Ben, and how, George, it's something we talk about a lot. He always, for better or for worse, really push the technology of filmmaking forward,
Mhm.
right? One thing a lot of people, I hope, understand, even if you don't love the CGI of the prequels, is without those movies, we would not be where we are today with our technology. He absolutely pioneered a lot of techniques. He was not afraid
Right.
to be the first one to try something. And so you're right. Maybe he would be all over the streaming. I guess for me, and this might be, I don't know. This might be. I've never met George, so I've never actually talked to him about
Right.
his. But he's always struck me as a little too hippie for the mainstream kind of
A
streaming
maverick.
services.
Yeah.
I mean, even though you're right, he's always known the marketability of his product and the merchandise possibilities. He always felt a little too renegade, too rogue to be run by a big studio. So it would probably mean Lucasfilm would have to have their own streaming service, which would be just kind of fascinating in
Oh
the
man.
streaming
Yeah.
service wars, right?
Yeah.
It would be interesting to say the
That's an
least.
interesting point, actually. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It feels like he would want control. He
Hmm.
would want to like have his own streaming. And I will say as well, this documentary I'm extremely excited to watch. It looks like we have
Yeah.
some new interview footage of George himself. A lot of the movies they're showing here related to Indiana Jones, the Marvel movies. I see even like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Like this
Yeah.
should be really cool if you're into the art of filmmaking, which I tend to enjoy a lot of these behind the scenes looks. And they show in
Hmm.
this trailer, if you guys weren't paying attention the first time through, a lot of Star Wars. There's going to be a lot
Yeah.
of behind the scenes of you see pod racing here and more. So
Yeah.
this comes out a bit later this year. I am extremely excited. It's called Light and Magic. So,
Six episodes, right?
yeah, I think it starts later this month, July 27th. So,
Nice.
should be very exciting. Good segue there, Ben, to get us kicked off.
Hmm.
Now, to turn away from the big screen and to the beautiful paper of books, we want to talk a little bit about Shadow of the Sith, a book that I am not finished with. So you're not going to get spoilers because neither of us are. Ben nor myself are finished. And there's Jimmy. So none of us have finished the book. We're all reading it though. But I want to talk really focused around the position, like how this book works in the current Star Wars tapestry. Meaning, you have the sequel trilogy era that was not widely loved. There's a lot of fans out there who like it. You know, Ben, for example, really likes Last Jedi. Actually enjoys all three movies more than the prequel movies. Even I've seen your most recent rankings. I, who really like The Force Awakens, I think The Force Awakens is a really, really fun Star Wars movie. Not as big a fan of The Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker. This is the first book, not in the sequel trilogy era, absolutely not. But it seems to be one of the first ones that's coming out after the big kind of disputed release of The Rise of Skywalker. And not only is it in that era, it leans heavily into the characters and heavily into the plot that was set up in that Rise of Skywalker. So I think a lot of fans were on the fence about what to expect with this book. Is it Disney just trying to fill in the gaps? Is it going to feel cheap and ham-fisted? So I think a lot of fans were kind of skeptical of what this book could provide. I was on the excited side. I think Ben was more skeptical. I wanted to start with initial thoughts. I'm about a quarter of the way through. Ben's about halfway through. So I want to talk about what we think so far, but also what we're enjoying about this era, if anything. Is it smart to tell stories here? Are we finding that this is actually an era that has some room to grow, or is it something Disney should leave behind? So I'll start with you, Ben. You're about halfway through. If people don't know, it's their first time watching the show, Ben has read many a Star Wars book. He has read almost all Legends books that have existed. He has been a long time reader. So Ben has a much wider range of perspective of Star Wars novels. And so I want to hear your thoughts. How does it compare to books you've read? Does it feel like a legend story? Does it feel like kind of this Disney canon? Where are you at so far with Shadow of the Sith?
Okay, so I'm halfway through the book. I was very, very hesitant to pick it up. I have like this very weird relationship with sequels. Like, I enjoy the films, right? But I also see big problems with them. And I honestly, as much as I enjoy Luke in them, because this book is primarily featuring Lando and Luke, I was on the fence. Like, I didn't think that I wanted any more of that Luke from sequel era, which is weird because I like him, right?
You do.
And then the book comes out and I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's take it, for what it is and just invest into it and see what the story tells there. And I knew right away, even before the book was announced, that sequel era will be heavily explored via expanded universe, just like the prequel films were filled out by the extensive expanded universe Legends novels, right? And I think it was a beautiful synergy there, right? You saw content on the screen and then minor characters or characters that you didn't even know names of in prequels popped in the books and got full stories there. So with this one, immediately as we jump into the book, what I really appreciate a lot is that it didn't do what I was afraid Shadow of the Jedi was going to do. And it's making excuses, apologies, and retcons for the sequel trilogy, primarily Rise of Skywalker, which has the most vocal kind of criticism.
Yeah.
I think majority of fans have big criticism. I personally enjoyed this movie a lot, but I also think it's critically flawed. As I'm reading the book, the most beautiful response I'm getting so far is that it doesn't make me think of the sequels. I'm not focused on the sequels like, oh, it's okay, so this chapter over here is filling out that gap. You know what I mean? I'm not making those connections. What the author very wisely has chosen to do, Adam Christopher, is that throw you in a story that feels fresh, that even though in terms of timeline you're situated, you know where it's at, it's much closer to the sequels than anything else. It's primarily focused on characters and it goes straight into Luke's thinking. And you're thinking to yourself, all right, so I don't have to worry whether this ties into sequels or not. I'm just here enjoying the great story. And the first thing that I responded to were how vintage the prose in this book feels.
Hmm.
It feels like I'm reading a book written in mid-90s, which is fascinating because to me, once you make that gap, that distinction between modern fiction and fantasy, immediately you're thrown into that Star Warsy sort of feel, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
I enjoy Bantam era books a lot from Legends because sometimes they're cheesy, sometimes they're weird. They have like weird technology, weird aliens, but
Yeah.
because it's so stylistically different, it immediately tells me it's Star Wars.
Yeah.
How about yourself?
I think that's really interesting thing you said, because I often describe this book like when I was reading about the excerpts, or reading the synopsis, I was thinking like, this sounds to me the most like a Legends book, like older Luke and Han, or excuse me, and Lando, excuse me, are on an adventure to find some secret Sith planet. I'm like, that sounds like a Legends novel, right? That sounds like a story of this. Ooh, what were the adventures that took place after, the Empire fell and Return of the Jedi? And so it's interesting to hear you say it sounds like the kind of that 90s era Star Wars style book. So for me, I'm not as deep into it as you are. And I was actually pretty excited for this book. I looked at this, and I know some fans disagree with me, but I looked at this as a way of like, okay, not a huge fan of the sequel trilogy. Some characters I really liked, some moments I really liked. Overall, not my favorite package. Can this do some things to make me connect with those characters more, or connect with that era more, and really appreciate, what happened in other places in the galaxy? And so I looked at this as like, I was pretty excited. If anything, I was less cautious and more optimistic. And about a quarter of the way through, I'm pleasantly surprised so far. One thing that I enjoy about this book compared to others I've read, so one of the reasons I enjoy the High Republic is it takes me to a place I haven't been before. It takes me to the same galaxy I know, but in a totally different time, with different, different challenges, but the same kind of core values. And so Shadow of the Sith feels very different to me than a story like Brotherhood, which is a lot more familiar, with characters I know in a setting that makes more sense and feels like I've seen it a little bit more with my experience with the Clone Wars. This feels like we're doing a lot of very fun, interesting things, which has kept me wanting to keep reading. I'm enjoying this kind of new Sith lore we're getting. That's not a spoiler, I think. We can see on the cover there's Sith characters in here, kind of fleshing out some of the things that Luke was doing after Return of the Jedi has been really encouraging for me. It's been really fun. And I will say, for those who really like the sequel trilogy, if you're here and you're a sequel trilogy fan, I'm going to say this is something you're going to really like, because I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They lean very heavily into those characters. I won't spoil it at all, but the characters that you've loved in the sequel trilogy, there's a chance they have moments in this book, at least in the first 10 to 12 chapters. You're going to find not just references either, not like allusions to characters, full on chapters from their perspective. And so I think if you're a sequel era fan, this has got to be really exciting for you. And one thing I would say, why I open with this topic is that, Ben and I have talked about this before. There's the prequel era, for example, that Ben didn't really enjoy when it came out, and still might view it, well, still does view it as the weakest kind of trilogy in the Star Wars anthology. But Clone Wars comes out, Bad Batch comes out, books like Brotherhood comes out, Dooku Jedi Lost, that completely just hit home runs for Ben. Ben loves those stories. And so an era that he doesn't really love the films has become a lot more, he's found more enjoyment in it in just different avenues. And I was hoping books like Shadow of the Sith could do the same thing for me when it comes to sequel trilogy. And so far, this is a new Star Wars author, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is his first foray into Star Wars.
If I'm not mistaken, he has done short stories.
Okay. I think this is his first full novel. It's a good point in the Star Wars universe. And it feels fresh and exciting. And it's getting me to come back and want to find out what happens next with my heroes. And I'm not bored in any way. Now, I got over half the book left, so my opinions could change. But overall, I'm excited that I can enjoy this era in a new way, right? I don't have to write off the whole thing, throw the baby out with the bathwater. I can find moments and pockets that work for me. Maybe over time, more of these stories get made, and I start maybe being a little more, open to some of the pros that this new kind of generation of Star Wars brought. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just kind of how I'm feeling as I'm reflecting on it.
Josh, you're coming full circle. You're basically experiencing now the kind of similar thing that I was going through with the prequel era. And once again, time has changed. 20 years later, I'm watching the prequels. And obviously, because of all of that amazing content, I sure as hell enjoy these movies 10 times more than I initially did. Yeah. And the funny thing is, I think you and I have spoken about it briefly because we did podcast about the sequels, is that, you know, a lot of fans speak about the Rise of Skywalker in a way that, hey, you know what? The content itself, it's not bad. It's just the pacing. It's like, it feels like there's 2 or 3 movies jammed into it with a lot of cool parts cut off. I have a theory. I'm feeling that the first chapters of the books kind of stand on their own and give you the chance and opportunity to meet that kind of Luke who is not quite where he is in The Last Jedi, right? Yes. But eventually, towards the second half of the book and towards the ending, it will lead not only to sequels, but into events that directly reflect what happens in The Rise of Skywalker. Yeah. And I personally feel, like, my experiment is going to be finish this book and go directly to Rise of Skywalker and rewatch it, because there were a lot of moments in The Rise of Skywalker that I loved. I'm like, wait, what is this ship they discover on the ground? What is this, the Sith knife or dagger they're looking for? There were a lot of Indiana Jonesy adventurous moments that didn't have enough context to really come through, but the ideas were really novel and cool. And I thought, oh man, you know, if he just allowed the story to tell itself a little bit more expansively, it could have been an entirely different film. And this is where this book comes in. And, you know, a lot of fans argue all the time and say, well, you know, this book can't repair or remedy the train wreck that the movie is. But hold on a second. We're not just talking about the film. We're talking about the story in the film. Once again, take a look at the prequel trilogy, which even you, as the biggest diehard fan, you see a little bit of flaws here and there, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Add all the added material to it. It makes it so much more engaging, so much more interesting. I think the same is going to happen with sequels.
It is absolutely required watching the entire Clone Wars show with the prequel era now. You know, so, you know, it added so much depth, context, understanding of what that Clone War was, that it can't be ignored. And so will that happen with the sequel trilogy? Maybe not, but I'm still can find pockets of enjoyment throughout. You know, I would say too, as someone who, it's really funny actually. Something funny is gonna happen to me where I'm not a prequel or a sequel fan. Excuse me. I like moments. I like some of the movies, but not really ever a defender in any way. But the constant obsession with hating those movies actually makes me like them more in a weird way. Like almost I'm so tired of hearing the over-the-top bashing and complaining that it's like, I want to actually stand up from a little bit. It's like, guys, come on. Let's take a little bit of a chill pill. They aren't this insult to filmmaking like some people have like to pretend. It's almost like when they've gone so crazy, you know, they blow the thing out of proportion. I'm like, okay, guys, like, wait a second here. The movies weren't that. The Force Awakens is a very good movie. And as Ben and I talked about recently, everyone like 90% of people liked that movie when it came out. Like everyone out here, Star Wars Theory, Star Wars, we all did. Everyone was like, yeah, Force Awakens is really a good time. I can't wait to see where these characters go. And because that payoff for a lot of us fell flat, more importantly, inconsistent. I think it was absolutely inconsistent. The films did not ever feel like they had a concise vision, which made them jarring going from film to film, where it felt like a director had a vision, another director had a good idea, and then the same director from the first one came back and like tried to revert back to what he was doing. It just felt so like just inconsistent that it was hard to hold on to. Yeah. But regardless, you know, I'm vibing with the book. I like it. I'm excited. And I think there's maybe some specific things we can talk to beyond just the era, really focusing on the era. Ben, one thing you talked to me about a little bit was the description of the Force in this book, how it's alluded to. Do you want to dive into that a little bit and then give some, we won't go spoilery, but maybe just talk a little bit about how it's portrayed.
Don't worry about this. Yeah. One thing that I really enjoyed about the sequels as a whole is the use of the Force, because, you know, Force is arguably more or less it's magic. It's this fantastical element, and I think it works best for the story when it's not fully explained. and you don't understand all the mechanics of it.
Yeah,
You can understand basic concepts, basic theology, or their principles, or the Jedi code, or the Sith code. That's cool. But as far as the Force as the entity goes, it's veiled in that mystery. And that was one of my big concerns for this book as well. I said, well, okay, am I going to be attracted to this period of the storytelling? Am I going to feel that it's substituting for something that was missing in the films? Or is it boldly going to go into unknown territory? Right? And I really enjoyed in the films themselves, the Reylo telescoping, the Force skyping, how they communicate with one another, how it's such an interesting visual trick to allow two characters in different spaces to touch with one another. I loved how Yoda was able to manipulate physical stuff, burning the tree in The Last Jedi and so forth. So in this book, something unexpected is happening. Like, obviously, I'm much further in the book than you are.
Yeah.
But what I'm absolutely loving, and once again, it's hearkening back to the best days of Star Wars Legends, is when an author is not afraid to take an established concept and push the limits of it. And not in the way that it's trying to explain it or rationalize it, but in a way that only makes it more mysterious and raises more questions. Like, oh, hold on a second, what are you doing here? How does this work? But if it's almost like fantastical realism they talk about in movies and books, right? That the book or story establishes its own set of rules, but then it needs to follow them in order to be convincing. That's exactly what this book is doing. You have these very cool, interesting new Sith and Jedi lore ideas, how the Force works, and all the questions being raised, but in a way that is very, very consistent with Star Wars. At the same time, very fresh and new. I'm completely enamored with this aspect of the book.
I'm glad you brought into the whole. So everyone knows I'm a big Sith guy. I really enjoy when they give us a little bit more. One of the reasons I like the Sith is they are mysterious. To Ben's point, there is that kind of mysticism, but I do love when the curtain's pulled back a little bit. One of the reasons that the Darth Bane trilogy is so loved is it kind of gives you that peek behind the curtain, a little bit of how the order comes to be. I think of the episode of Rebels when they they go to that old ancient Sith weapon. I love that stuff. And in this book, even early on, there is no lack of exploring the Sith and their ways. And of course, the Sith cultists, where we see in The Rise of Skywalker, I eat that stuff up. That's my kind of stuff. I'm all about kind of that exploring of the dark arts. I think that's super fun. And there's been a lot of that early on as well. I think the High Republic has a lot of that as well, which is why I enjoy it. Again, I like what you said there, Ben, about how the Force is a little bit mysterious in the way it works, and that keeps it engaging, right? There are basic principles that it typically follows, but there is some fun in not knowing all the mechanics, right? And so being able to explore that. And this book, again, one of the reasons I to me, it feels like more of a Legends-esque book, is it has that kind of ancient Sith and the Force. It's like I really just, it's fun, and I think it works really well in a book format. And I'm doing the Audible book, and what they do a lot of, for those who are going to check it out in Audible, they do a lot of music theming based on setting, and so there's a lot of Sith kind of vibes to this book. No duh. Right. It's called Shadow of the Sith. And so they'll do a lot of very cool Sith-like music and voice modulation. There's a character in the book who's got kind of a unique voice. And so they have the narrator kind of take on that interesting voice style. And that really kind of pulls me in as well. So I really like that. But yeah, that's how I'm vibing with it. I'm excited. I'm happy that a lot of fans. Yeah, go ahead.
Josh, did you get to anywhere close to what we see on the screen?
Yes, I have.
What are your thoughts on that?
I enjoy it. I do. I won't say much more. The reason I'm showing this art and not considering it a spoiler is they released this months and months before the book came out. It is the mysterious, Sith character. And anytime you add a new Sith, there's always kind of a reaction of like, because the Sith are so few in number, who could this be? I don't remember hearing about this person. I really like the way that this book is kind of addressing this kind of Sith cult that we saw in The Rise of Skywalker. And this character is obviously unique, as you can tell by the design. And I'm kind of vibing it right now. So
It's I think without spoilers, guys, we can say it's a she. It's a female, right?
It
Again,
is.
it's
Yep.
something that was
Oh yeah, of course.
in the excerpts, you see it in the artwork. My concern was, once again, when I was very on the fence, and I was a little bit deflated, actually, because I was the huge fan of the returning Palpatine.
Yeah.
And I mentioned to you earlier that I actually wasn't a fan of his in the Legends as well.
Yeah, you have. Yeah.
I love the Dark Empire comic primarily for its magnificent art by Cam Kennedy, right? The Scottish comic book artist. I was like, oh, come on. Every time we go to the Emperor clone or Luke Skywalker clone or somebody else's clone popping out of nowhere that has no narrative gravitas, and is just there for the sake of being, oh, look, the Emperor is back. I don't like it. So big question was, how do we introduce Sith here? Right? Because Luke killed, the Emperor was dead, Vader is redeemed. We have no space for Sith in that time frame. Like, they're all gone. Who else? There's only two, the Master and Apprentice. But the way they're doing it here, the connections they're making with the present, past, and how they're playing around with the timelines here, once again, I think it's all to the credit of the author, where he knows how to grab your attention and say, no. You're going to follow through my story. Just wait till you get to the end. And he has that hook from the first early chapters. Even when I read the excerpts, I wasn't convinced yet. But once you start reading the book from the beginning and getting into it, it grabs your attention.
Absolutely. Well said. And to reply to this comment, actually, this is kind of fun. So V818 said, do you collect Star Wars hot toys? So I actually have my first hot toy coming probably next month. So I have the Hunter hot toy from the Bad Batch. I had to get the leader, had to get my boy. Should be here. I will do a review on the channel. There's a couple. I have my eye on, specifically the new Cad Bane hot toy. Looks phenomenal. Made a video on the channel because I just thought it was so cool. I think one day, Ben, I have to make a little like hot toy display where I could have some sort of, I would love if they do a Vader and Obi-Wan from the Kenobi show with the damaged mask, and I could kind of have that kind of diorama built out behind me. So I am definitely getting more into the hobby. I say it's for the health of the channel, but really I like to do it.
It's for the health of Josh.
It is a little bit for the health of me. Absolutely.
Josh, I will not forgive you if you miss out on the Mythos version of Kenobi.
Oh, it's a good set. Yeah,
it's still available, even though the figurine came out a while ago. I know you're vibing with the Kenobi show. You enjoyed it a great deal.
I did.
I will not forgive you if upon that shelf with the rest of the Hot Toys figures, Kenobi's not there, man.
One of the things I liked during Star Wars Celebration is they had so the live stream for Celebration was fun, but it wasn't, everyone wants to be in the panels watching all those cool reveals. We didn't get all of that. But one of the things they did during the live stream that I kind of liked is they went to some of the booths and showed some of the stuff they had. And that Mythos statue is one of the things they had. But from a collector perspective, there's so many cool Star Wars like figures and cosplayers and toys at Star Wars Celebration. Like that would be like half of the fun for me, just to see all that kind of cool Star Wars memorabilia. I eat that stuff up. I'm a big fan. Speaking of which, before we get too far away from Star Wars Celebration, I have to ask you, did you get tickets for Star Wars Celebration next year in London, Ben?
No.
Yeah, no, I didn't either. I was going to pretend for a second there that one of us did. Like, no, nobody got those next year. Hey, not next year, the year after, Gabbing Gonks live from Star Wars Celebration. Just kind of mark that down on the calendar.
We made a promise to each other between Jim, Josh, and myself that each one of us is going to get 300,000 heads per person. So together we'll share 1 million followers. Then we will definitely have a panel.
That's it. On our way. One sub at a time. One sub at a time. That's it. So that wraps up my thoughts on Shadow of the Sith. I have a lot more to read. I know Jimmy is about halfway through as well. We'll have a review on the channel. I'm sure Ben will as well. And then I think we'll revisit the topic. Now that things can change a lot in half a book. We might have completely different perspectives when it wraps. But we are very excited. I'm very excited with what I've seen so far. And I love Star Wars books that show me something new. Brotherhood's great because it enhances a relationship that we know. This book to me is great because it's giving me stories I haven't heard yet, giving me scenarios that I haven't quite encountered. And that brings a lot of excitement for me as I'm reading through.
Yeah. I will forever be grateful to Brotherhood for giving me a completely different look on the Neimoidians. It was beautiful.
Now we transition over to the silver screen, to streaming, to Andor. We are only like 8 weeks away at this point. It's so much closer than you think. And we know a lot about Andor. Well, I say a lot. We got details on the construction of the show. So I will give you a kind of a quick summary, and then I'll pull up a visual here. There's going to be 2 seasons of Andor, okay? The first season is going to be 12 episodes, and the second season is 12 episodes. It's 24 episodes, roughly, I'm going to assume about 30 minutes to an hour each episode. So you can expect between 20 to 24 hours of Andor. And the show has a very interesting model. So for the first season, directors got 3 episode chunks. So that means 4 directors came in and got their own 3 episode arc. And one director actually got 2. So we'll go ahead and pull up the directors' names right here. Mm-hmm. I'd be lying if I said I was familiar with them, but let's get the names out here. Welcome them to the Star Wars universe. We have Toby Haynes, who's on Black Mirror. I know a show a lot of people really enjoy. So he's doing episode 1, 2, 3, and then 8, 9, 10. So he's got 2 of the blocks. We have Suzanne White from Billions, episode 4, 5, and 6. And then Benjamin Caron, The Crown, which is a really good show, actually, but a whole different kind of genre of show, will get episodes 7, 11, and 12. So 3 different directors have their own little blocks of storytelling. Mm-hmm. And season 2 is going to change it up even more. Not only are those blocks going to possibly have different directors, but they'll also take place a year apart. So let me pull up this little timeline here, this wonderful Star Wars television Twitter account came up with to kind of visualize. So this is Rogue One. And so you'll see episode 1 through 12 take place all in this kind of first year. And then when we get to season 2, episodes 1 through 3, 1 year, 4 through 6, the next year, 7 through 9, the next year, and 10 through 12 the year after that. So I know I just gave a lot of information, but if I were to condense it, I would say Andor is going to be broken up a little bit different. It's going to have almost mini arcs within the show itself, and it's going to have a lot of time passage. And that is actually a little exciting to me for the simple fact that we're probably going to get to see a lot of different phases of the galaxy, a lot of different ways. I think when the show starts off, we'll still see maybe the semblance of a galactic senate with obviously Palpatine at the head. But by the end, that might be completely gone. That pretend, mock Senate might be gone. But regardless, we can see the more transition of the clone troopers to the stormtroopers, more transition of the rebels and how they've grown and how they kind of formed their military factions. And also with directors having control over kind of a 3-hour arc, I think that could allow for like entirely different maybe styles of episodes. A director could have a very unique voice and visual that they want to tell for this year. And the next year, maybe we see an entirely different flair. I think this is exciting news, but I'm going to turn over to Ben. I got to grab a refill of my water. I'm going to leave this visual up. Ben, get us kicked off with if you're excited for this Andor timeline.
Right. First of all, I didn't know how to feel, guys, that we're getting 2 seasons. As I mentioned all the time in our live streams, I'm a greedy Star Wars fan. I always want more. I was kind of gearing up for 3 or 4 or 5 with infinite amounts of seasons, as long as the show is good. But I don't know where I'm going there immediately, but still, it's something I'd like to say is if we get these 2 seasons, right? And obviously, we know what happens with Cassian, Rogue One happens.
Yeah.
You may still have an excuse where the legacy of Cassian, whatever kind of first, cells of resistance rebellions that he put up, that either they call a new battalion after his name or a new regiment or a new squadron, and they kind of like pick up with that idea and follow through with it past the first 2 seasons. That would be really cool. But in terms of structure, here's the thing. When you look at shows like Breaking Bad, right? When you look at shows like Stranger Things, which we're going to touch upon later on, you'd also have different directors, but stylistically, they're indistinguishable in a sense of visual language. Like you still feel like you're watching the same style show, the same vibes. Is that just one director cranks up the action, other director
Yeah.
homes in on a dramatic episode where perhaps a popular character dies off, and they need to give them a proper send-off. So they accentuate different aspects of the show and the story. This is what I hope happens here. I don't think I want to see 3 episodes which are stylistically, visually, and narratively very different from other ones, because it's going to start feeling more like an anthology.
Yeah.
Jarring in a way, right? We're still under the same flagship of Andor show. I assume he's going to be the lead star. But within the frame of this show, it's not just Andor, right? We also see that they're heavily advertising Mon Mothma.
Yep.
You could have 3 episodes where Cassian pops in and out. He's like, yes, ma'am, order received. I'm onto my mission.
Mm-hmm.
And then those 3 episodes focus on her arc, on her battles within the Senate. I really, really hope they exploit the first 3 episodes to show us the Order 66, to show us that pivotal change, what we saw in the Bad Batch series premiere, where the Republic officially becomes an empire, and how it creates a rift within the Senate. I think that would be a very, very interesting premise, and that will justify why different directors are handling their different arcs, because we're moving the story from this one great character, Mon Mothma, to Cassian Andor. Maybe perhaps Saw Gerrera will show up. Who knows, right? So that's, I think, how they should exploit it.
So a couple thoughts that I want to say. First of all, to the Blue Pigs comment here about, he's commenting on the fact that he'd like some shows that had longer staying power, that we could get more invested with those characters and see them kind of grow over time. I totally agree with that. I would like a show that gave us, like the Clone Wars, or we compare it to a Stranger Things we'll talk about later, where you get a new group of characters and you kind of grow with them, right? You see full arcs that take years and years and years of being with them. I absolutely want to see that from Star Wars as well.
Yeah.
We're getting a little bit of that with The Mandalorian, in just a much smaller scale. They still have a lot of existing characters make appearances, and it's only been a handful of seasons we've really gotten, and they're shorter episodes, so it might not feel the same sort of change and arc happening with our characters that we might see in these larger epics. I do hope one day Star Wars gives us something like that as well. But to your point, Ben, one of the things about the Bad Batch that I love so much is we're seeing this transition period that I think is so fantastic to watch. So interesting, really leaning in the Bad Batch into Ralph McQuarrie's concept art and the design of the troopers, etc. One of the reasons I can't wait for season 2 is to continue to see the galaxy changing, and we have the ability to see that from a totally different perspective, not just live action, but also, like you said, Mon Mothma being in the Senate, right? A rebel alliance in its infancy. We can get a whole different perspective on a changing galaxy, which I really think should give the storytellers some really powerful ideas to explore. So this is a really, originally I wasn't super excited for the show, just because they're like, we're making an Andor spinoff, and I was thinking like, okay, we're gonna get like a 5 or 6 episode miniseries where we meet the character who dies in Rogue One. But how they're telling me now, it's like, well, actually, you're gonna spend 5 years with this character as he starts with no real cause, nothing to fight for, and as he sees the galaxy become more and more dire, he has to have a change of heart. I think that could be really cool, just for the galactic implications going on around the character. So I think, to maybe hone in on one of the points you said, though, and maybe discuss in more detail, you talked about it maybe feeling like an anthology series. That was one thing that I kind of thought as well. Now, I don't expect the show will take true style changes, just because, look, it's Disney, right? They tend to play it safe a little bit with these streaming shows. None has veered too far from the path of what to expect. So I do have a feeling these shows will feel, very much like Star Wars shows and very much like Andor. But for example, with Visions, which was an anthology series that you really loved, we know there's absolutely opportunity. Would you like to see a live action anthology series at some point? We're getting Tales of the Jedi, which will be a short form animated version of that. But would you like a Star Wars live action anthology at some time in history?
I actually have not thought about it for a second, but now that you bring it up, I think it would be absolutely fantastic. And more so not only an anthology, but also an anthology that is not specifically canonical. Because once again, it's such an interesting
Agreed.
setup, right? Where you could, hey, one episode is focused on a Jedi, another one you could be a bounty hunter, like Valance or something like that, right? You could jump in and Dr. Aphra shows up. Again, you could, instead of trying to invest in an entire show and have it flop, you just produce one anthology and you give per episode for the fans of the old school Tales of the Jedi, for the fans of Revan, for the fans of this and that. And once you bring it in, then I think it's also a great experiment to say, hey, wait, hold on a second. The Ninth Jedi caught up with fans like that. I think we have a show here. And then you extend it. I always thought of it this way, Josh. You know how when you go to Netflix, you could rate a show, or when you buy a PlayStation product, you could rate it only if you purchase it. Mm-hmm. I don't understand why streaming services like Disney Plus or Netflix don't have these kind of votes where, let's say, season 5 or season 3 of the Stranger Things comes out and people rate it episode by episode. If that's the best, greatest metric you have of what people respond to, like, dude, why don't you do it with Star Wars? And now you have very visible kind of evidence of what people like. Oh, hold on a second. Of all the anthology shorts that we did here, people responded to The Ninth Jedi. I guess that's where we're going next.
I would tell you right off the bat, you are absolutely dead on with your idea for an anthology series. So many fans want that exact same thing.
Yeah.
Explore non-canon, explore canon, get just some directors who do. I don't care if some of them are terrible, right? Because some fans might love the ones that I think are terrible. Get some creative directors, some visionary directors. Let them just, no rules. I mean, obviously you might want to keep it within a certain age rating just because Disney has certain content requirements. Mm-hmm. But like, honestly, let a director who comes in, who has no intention of telling a nice canonical fitting Star Wars story. He wants to tell a story about Jedis who use lightsabers with their feet. Like, I'll watch it, like, let's have some fun. I think that'd be a fantastic idea, an absolutely fantastic idea. And I would just say, if I was tomorrow in a meeting with Kathleen Kennedy, the creative heads of Lucasfilm, I would say, hey, look, do whatever you have to do to give us a full yearly all-in anime of The Ninth Jedi. I want 30 seasons like Naruto. I want to watch The Ninth Jedi for the next 20 years. I want us to all be, I would love that. So I wanted to call that out as well.
Yeah.
I wonder if, as we move towards a streaming first model, let's call it what it is. Streaming is becoming the most popular form of watching films. If Disney will feel more bold to adventure out into those avenues. I think Visions was a really positive first step. The fact that it has a second season coming next year where they broaden the horizons, going to Chile and the UK and India, and they're going all over to different, countries for animation work. I hope if that continues to have success, they feel emboldened to go give, it's funny to me because they'll give a director like Taika Waititi who has a very specific style, a very specific sense of humor, a very adult sense of humor, and they'll give him a Star Wars movie like, hey, let's get some folks just like a 30-minute short. Like, I bet they'd kill it. I don't know. I think it'd be a ton of fun. An absolute ton of fun.
I love the fact that he forgot Natalie Portman was in the Star Wars. Man, this is so tongue-in-cheek. I love people exploding, or this is where like just Benjamin sits back, chews his popcorn, like, I'm here for the comments.
Are you? Let me ask you this: have you seen? And folks in chat, you let me know as well. Have you seen What We Do in the Shadows? Not the show, his movie, the original movie by Taika Waititi.
I hear his original stuff is awesome.
It is. That movie is really, really good. It is. It works so well because it's kind of low budget. It's a mockumentary, and he's kind of the lead one of the lead performances as well. And it's just such a good movie. It's so good. He can go a little bit over the top with some of his other stuff as well. I mean, that's kind of his style. He can be a little over. I think Jojo Rabbit was also really good. I'm not sure if folks watched that, but that movie is quite funny, but also very, very dark and not afraid to explore dark themes. So I wonder what he'll be allowed to do with Star Wars. I go to see Thor tomorrow night, so I will see his next blockbuster. I'm a little, not to get us off topic here, I'm a little scared for this one. Not because of his humor, but I think they have a fantastic villain. I think they have a fantastic actor playing that villain, and the movie is only an hour and like 50 minutes, and that just tells me that villain is going to be non-impactful at all. He's going to be in the movie for like 30 minutes of screen time and die off at the end. And that is my biggest pet peeve about Marvel movies, is they have this obsession, this fascination with killing the main villain at the end and just getting them out of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons I love the Batman so much is at the end of the movie, like the villains are still there. They're all still in play.
Yeah.
They're in prison. It's his rogue gallery. They'll break out again one day and they'll fight again. I love that like reoccurring enemy, that
Mm-hmm.
dynamic, that rivalry. And you take that away from us when Marvel is so insistent on killing. Like Ultron is the perfect example. You have like a sentient being who can duplicate himself, make tons of backups and copies. That's why it's so hard to kill him. And you make like the most clean, disconnected from the internet, kill him, he's gone. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I know you could still bring him back, but my biggest fear for this movie is they're going to do the same thing to Gore the God Butcher, who's played by, you know, the fantastically talented Batman himself, right? I mean, Batman, one of the Batmans is literally playing him, some people's favorite Batman. And, you know, I don't know. I just think they're going to ruin him. I think they're going to, I shouldn't say ruin him. I just think he's not going to have enough time to shine and they're going to kill him at the end. That's my big fear.
Yeah.
That's my big fear. We'll find out. Christian Bale, I hope you're great. I hope the movie's great, but I'm afraid of that. Okay. Tangent over. Marvel's done. But we are going to switch to a non-Star Wars property, but with a catch. I want to talk about this from a Star Wars fan's perspective. And it's Stranger Things Season 4. Now, I don't think we'll get really spoilery, but we might. If you're afraid of having anything spoiled, you know, click away, go watch the show, and then feel free to kind of weigh in here. But I basically want to talk about what Star Wars streaming shows can learn from the success of Stranger Things. Now, for a little background, Ben is a huge fan of Stranger Things. I think he's enjoyed all the seasons. I really loved the first one. I thought 2 and 3 were actually pretty overhyped. They were fine, but didn't really get my pulse up. Really couldn't. When season 4 was announced, I was like, whatever, you know, it's coming. Wasn't really excited to watch. But guys, I think season 4 was actually really, really impressive and really, really good. My favorite season of the show so far. But when I say impressive, it's because they were able to give so many characters time to shine. So many characters, including new ones, really heartfelt moments. And they were able to have an hour and 15-minute episodes, including a 2.5-hour finale, and use that time really effectively. And as I was watching this season and I was having some really good time and finally clicking with the show for the first time in like 3 or 4 years, one thing that I kept telling my wife or people watching it with me is like, I'm very impressed with the way they were able to write and give us these very long episodes with like 6 plots going at once and keep me engaged and keep me just absolutely just invested in these characters. Now, I don't think it's perfect. I think there was one storyline in particular that I really felt like probably could have been cut. It always felt to me like it was one too many. It didn't ruin it or anything. I just was like, there was a lot going on, and one of them in particular was weaker for me. But all I could think when I watched it was 2 things. Number one, I kind of lined up with the Blue Pig said earlier, which is I'd love some time with a group of Star Wars characters over a 5-6 year period where we really grew with them, because I've grown with these kids. I've grown with the adults. I've grown with these stories because of the passage of time. We grow with them. I'd love to see that happen for Star Wars. And number 2, I'd really, really like if they were okay with longer formatted episodes. A lot of the problems with Kenobi, I like Kenobi a lot. I think Kenobi's fantastic. Ben does not. But maybe we could both agree on the fact that I think longer episodes could have done Kenobi a lot of help. A lot of storylines, I said this even in my negative comments, that some storylines just seem to kind of come, go, and be resolved in a matter of 5 minutes of screen time. And if we were more comfortable with giving an episode time to breathe, giving emotional moments time to stay on screen, giving that kind of time to your characters can pay off so well. And so that was one of the things I just thought. I was like, man, I wish Star Wars would be more comfortable giving us these epic episodes, these epic storylines, these involved characters, and overall the creative vision. You have a creative team who's crafted their 4 seasons going into 5, and that has really, really helped build kind of a consistent voice and consistent style. And those were the 3 things that stuck out to me. Now I have some more comments there, but I said a lot. Ben, you're a huge Stranger Things fan. You think the show's perfect. What do you see in the show that you would like to see Star Wars adopt or take or embrace in their streaming shows?
Just tiny bit of preface, I was clueless about what the show was going to be about. My younger brother told me about it. He's like, hey, Ben, I think we should watch it. It's going to be in that retro style that you grew up in the 80s, like your kind of generation, Goonies and all that stuff. Let's just watch it. And from season 1 to this season, I don't watch the show. Remember, like you and I, we spoke about Star Wars Celebration, how you get hyped, the culture of it, the fans getting excited. I don't feel like that about the show. I don't go into each episode, hype. I wonder what happens to this character and that character. There's no moment where I'm anticipating for things. I'm just there like on a roller coaster. I go in, I strap myself in, let's go, shoot away. What are you telling me here? And I think it is from season 1, episode 1, to this last final season episode, it's immaculate. In this show, in every single possible way, it is flawless. Could there be moments where it focuses a little bit more on the character or continues that particular storyline and explains the question? Yeah, absolutely. But what's completely flawless here is me as a viewer sitting down and forgetting that I'm watching a movie or a show, and I'm living with these characters. And at the end of the day, it's not about the other world. It's not about the cool things that they come up with to fight evil or practical effects. It's people. This is the most essential, fundamental things, whether it's sci-fi or fantasy, that we gravitate to. What I think Star Wars can emulate, particularly live action Disney Plus, is that it's not a matter of the episode length. It's not a matter of the format of the show. This is why, okay, so you and I, we both know that I wasn't a huge fan of Kenobi. How I'm going into this Cassian Andor show in light of Kenobi? What kind of expectations am I going to have? And the answer will always be the same. I don't have any expectations. That's what they're doing. That's the structure they just revealed to us. Fine. I'm okay with it. Just because where Kenobi didn't succeed, I don't think Andor will fall into the same traps. Perhaps it will, 100%. But I think the lesson here, first and primary lesson to take from Stranger Things, is that understand what you're doing. Figure out what it is about the story that you want to tell, what is the most effective way to do it. Sometimes it takes only 18 minutes and you could wrap your story up with the Ninth Jedi and people get enough to get their juices flowing and ask for more. Sometimes it's a 2-hour epic season finale episode that honestly felt to me like 25 minutes because it was so good. The length is not a factor. I think it's getting the right people, which I personally feel live action Star Wars has not had the same caliber of storytellers or filmmakers, not by a longer shot. They're clearly on a different level of skill and understanding how the story works. What they've done with Stranger Things, in my personal eye, it's the new metric. It's the new benchmark. It's everything that Star Wars should aspire to. And look at what makes shows memorable first. And once again, it's not going to be your special effects. Look, I would wager if The Mandalorian season 2 was immaculately told story, and then at the end of it, we get that unfortunately half-baked Luke Skywalker CGI effect. If the story was there for me, I would have disregarded that unfinished effect and say, well, you know what? Okay, I understand what they're doing. Maybe they ran out of budget, maybe not enough time, but damn, the story was great. This is my Luke. I'm happy he's back. You see what I'm going there?
I do.
I hope that, Disney Plus is taking notes and seeing what the Stranger Things army is rallying behind. It's not the novelty of this crazy world and creatures running around. It's the stories that they're telling that we all can connect with, especially the story with the gingerhead in this final episode, which it just went straight to my heart, man. It's so relatable to my life experience, the tragedy, the trauma that I've experienced. And you look at this stuff like, oh, man, I can relate. This is what I want Star Wars to feel like. Not a cool moment between Kenobi and Vader. Like, oh man, remember the particular episode in the prequel, and now they're connecting this stuff. Not this kind of emotional beat. The kind of emotional beat that goes and translates to the entire show from episode to episode.
I tend to, as we've talked about before, I won't make us go derail. We've talked about this the last couple of weeks, but I tend to view them in different ways. And one thing I will say that's been really fascinating to me about this, so Stranger Things have been huge. So I'm getting a bunch of like behind the scenes things recommended to me on social media, and a bunch of stuff on Twitter is always filling my feed. One thing I've noticed about the creative team behind Stranger Things is you might think like, oh, the Duffer Brothers, they have like this perfect crafted story, and they have since day one, and look at the time they put into it. It's not the case at all. Meaning, one thing in particular. So if you've never watched Stranger Things at all, minor spoiler for season one. It shouldn't impact your enjoyment of season one. There's a character introduced named Steve. And Steve has kind of an arc where he starts off as a really unlikable character and eventually becomes very lovable, a fan favorite. Now, when they wrote Steve originally, they wrote him to die in season one. But the way he worked on set, the way the cast kind of vibed with him, the way, you know, their kind of original screen test really enjoyed him, they kept him alive. And then the way fans responded to him made them kind of bring him back again and again, meaning they have responded admittedly on the fly. They're like, hey, when we put a character out there and the fans really gravitate towards it, that does impact kind of our vision. Or when the actors work really well with him and we see good story beats, that impacts how we write the show and what happens. I thought that was fascinating, right? Because in my head, maybe foolishly, I would think, you know, you can't let the audience overly dictate to you what you should do with characters. Even if they love a character and it's the best and he's a beautiful actor and wonderful with the cast, you can't. Game of Thrones, I thought, did this really well in the first couple seasons, where even the best characters, they had no problem saying, hey, they're going to die because this is the world we've crafted. And so my head has always been in a place where it's like, no, you have to, you know, have your vision and your story and tell it. Why these guys have taken almost a totally different approach, where they've let fans and cast members and things like that change their entire story arcs. And I think that is like really, really interesting and kind of changed my perception of what kind of a good creative vision can mean. And so I don't know if there's any major takeaways beyond the fact that there's a lot of different ways that you can handle large storytelling. And these two guys have seemed to find a really good footing on giving fans what they want, but also telling unique and interesting stories. One other thing I will call out about Stranger Things. Again, I thought season 2 and 3 were pretty average. Not saying bad. I'm not saying that at all. Just didn't blow me away the way season 1 and season 4 did. I thought they were fine. There was an entire storyline in one of the seasons that they wrote, they put in there, and then it just didn't land with anyone, and they just never visited it again. Again, I'm not trying to spoil like the whole show. I don't know if that many people haven't watched it, but there's a storyline with a long-lost sister that fell completely on its face. It was terrible and forgettable. And you know what they did? They just said, we're not dealing with that anymore. That's just not, we're not, like, that didn't work. We tried. It didn't really work. And I love that because it goes so much to what we talk about with, like, there's so many times Star Wars fans are like, oh, this retcons something, or oh, this changes something. And, or George said here, and what George understood himself is that don't let decisions you made 20 years ago that now you found a better way. Don't let that ruin your good stories because you wrote yourself into a corner. The Star Wars original trilogy has many, Ben and I have talked about it. We don't need to beat this to a dead horse, but there are many inconsistencies within the movies themselves. And they don't even fully connect with the prequels that he wrote because he had different ideas. His ideas changed. He thought they were better. I agree with him, but he thought they were better. So he adjusted. And so I think it's really fascinating to me to see these guys who've created this huge world totally listen to the fans, see what works, and they change it. They say, you know what? We brought this side mission story up. It didn't work. Let's scratch it, move on. So learn from your mistakes.
I want to add there. You hit so many interesting points. You know, when we talk about how there's this side of the fandom which are purists. So it's like progression, everything needs to be thought out. And George had a vision for all three films, and we know you could go. There's books out there. There's documentaries how these movies were made. We know that he was developing the story as he went along. This is the truth with all entertainment. Yeah. What I really appreciate what's happening in the Stranger Things, and what I think that Star Wars can learn from is, I think all of storytelling is retroactive. You start somewhere and you see whether it's a fan's response. Imagine that 10,000 years ago, kids sitting by the campfire and you telling a story, right? And let's say you scare your audience with this one hunter who goes after the bison, right? And he's in mortal danger, but he survives. Once you understand that that particular concept worked on your audience, what are you going to do? You're going to exploit it again, right? So what I really enjoy that the brothers are doing, Duffel brothers, right? Mm-hmm. What they're doing, what I really enjoy is that I completely agree with you, Josh. Sometimes you could trace that something is being retroactive. Sometimes they're tinkering with the story. They're taking a certain character somewhere or deleting a story that they don't think that works. Once again, when I say it's immaculate, it's perfect, it means that I'm there for the ride and it feels seamless to me. That's all I meant to say. Like, it's not nothing is perfect, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. It's just, it's very easy to get into and enjoy the ride without ever feeling that you're out of the experience and your suspense of disbelief is being interrupted. What I really appreciate the brothers do is that how organic everything feels to me personally. Once you decide, like, you know what, like, right, we tried something with this character here. Why are fans not responding? We can't predict this kind of stuff. You know what, let's make an executive decision, cut it, right? Other things that we decided to do with this character, well, I didn't even know that this character was supposed to die off, and they kept him. Yeah. Once again, it's because I think if the strong storytelling was not there, it would immediately pop out. And even if you didn't know the fact, he was like, hold on a second, this doesn't connect. Something is off here. Why is this character in this season? It is so off-putting, right? Yep. So I think it's a testament to their skill to say to, like, you know what, let's put it. And this is where I will always appreciate and understand what George was doing with prequels. He was telling the story that he wanted to tell. He's like, oh, you know what? I kind of touched on the politics here in episode 4, right? I had Tarkin in the room with everybody else. I kind of want to lean into it and tell more. We see that Leia is being enslaved by Jabba the Hutt in Return of the Jedi, right? You know what? I kind of like this idea. Let me explore it further. Let me make the whole of Tatooine be a planet where slavery is being practiced on a regular basis, which is quite different from his frontier Westworld kind of like feeling in episode 4. I appreciate that. I like that. Regardless of the execution, how it came out, it's an entirely different conversation. But I always enjoy when directors do that.
I agree. And I meant it as a compliment as well, that they're able to know and pick up, this isn't working, and I'm adjusting. There's a massive talent in recognizing, and again, if you haven't watched season 2 of Stranger Things, I don't think I'm ruining any major plot point, but they at one point introduce Els, one of her sisters, who's like a different power set than she does. And she goes on this kind of like goth self-discovery phase. And they just scrapped it. It didn't work. It did not work. It didn't land. It felt like they were taking the show in more of like an X-Men superhero-y way. And fans really were vibing with like the 80s horror vibes, right? I think the showrunners realized that. They turned the ship around and doubled down on what worked. So it's a compliment that you can tell what your fans are enjoying and leaning into that. Absolutely. One other thing just inspired me before I forget this. Have you started the new season of Westworld yet, Ben?
No, I think I'm going to start tonight.
Okay. We are 2 episodes in. I want to hear your thoughts later. I won't spoil anything. We'll talk about it later. I'm a big Westworld fan, though. I think Ben is as well. In particular, I think season 1 is one of the best seasons of television ever. Like, phenomenal. I'm saying a standalone season, like of a show. I mean, it's a home run for me. Now, I know I have a friend who it's a little deep. It's into itself. It's a little, they're very into their own ideas, and it's a little,
it's very Memento. If you guys ever watched their Memento movies, right? The Nolan brothers, it's very Memento.
Yeah, it is very much
mind out. You guys,
I have seen it 100%. I think Memento is still on Netflix, or it was at some point.
Yeah.
One of the Nolan's early movies.
Mhm.
Yeah, it has a little bit. It's a little into itself, but I really enjoy it. A little cerebral, and I think this new season is doing some interesting things that we'll talk about at some other point. But those are the main topics I want to talk about tonight. Again, we are in a little bit of a Star Wars just kind of chill time. August, we pick right back up. Ben, is there anything else you're reading in Star Wars, that you're playing in Star Wars? What else is going on? Anything you want to share as we're winding down for the night?
I just made this goofy meme that I like to make. It's not really a meme. It's more like of a mock-up where I basically take the boxes of popular video game consoles, like, the latest PlayStation 5, Xbox, and so forth. And I asked fans, as like, hey guys, which Star Wars classic video games would you like to see official sequels to? And
Okay.
it's just so interesting, like seeing different answers from fans. Let me just scroll through it real quick. So basically, the games that I posted there were obviously the very popular Nintendo 64 game Shadows of the Empire.
Yes.
Would you like a part 2?
Mm-hmm.
I did the Star Wars Empire at War, which is a RTS, right? A real-time strategy video game, which is humongous popularity.
Yes.
And then the Jedi Academy Part 2, which obviously we just got a recent port on Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4. So I was asking fans, and once again, it's just such a visible thing that you could look at, and fans having like such diverse opinions. Fans go, no, but they already did this thing, did Squadrons, such a amazing game. It's so interesting to see how fans are going back and forth. And more you talk to people, you realize that our tastes are so different.
They are. And Star Wars games have a long history, right? It's funny because they feel, I don't know, it feels like the modern iterations, because we had Fallen Order, which is fantastic, and we've had some re-releases of Battlefront games. But Star Wars games go back to, golly, they go back. Even the original Battlefront game, I was young when that came out. It was fantastic. Right. I mean, original Xbox, I'm playing that on, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a long, storied history, and might I even say maybe some of the best new Star Wars we've got so far, at least story-wise, has been Fallen Order.
Yeah.
Is the game, it's the games, I own it, so I should know, but is the new Star Wars game just Squadrons? Is it Rogue Squadrons?
Squadrons.
It's just Squadrons, right?
Just Squadrons, yeah.
That is one of the hardest games I've ever played in my entire life. I mean, I'm serious. Has anyone played a harder game than Squadrons? Like, I went into ranked, and I consider myself like an okay, like I can't even see where I'm going. Like, it is so hard. And a couple years ago, was it years ago now? Maybe months ago. I think it was years ago. Eckhart's Ladder would do tournaments for that game.
Right.
And it was so cool to watch. Like, I wish that game would have had an esports scene, because it's super fun.
Yeah. I think they abandoned it relatively quickly.
They did. It was, one of the things too was it was a $40 game, I think. So it wasn't a full price game. It had its own story mode, which I played, which was fun. I enjoyed the story mode. And I just couldn't cut it online, guys. I'm not good enough. It was too hard for me. It was really cool though.
It's just that meme, and also reading, I'm pushing on with my new Thrawn trilogies from Timothy Zahn, obviously same author. And once again, it's a reminder where I enjoyed the first book and I reviewed it, again, by the author I adore, I grew up with. And now we're in the second book called Thrawn Alliances, where Thrawn is put together with Anakin Skywalker / Vader. They kind of go back and forth in time. Yep. And once again, just when you thought this, like, it's a bulletproof author, I love the character, everything is going to work out, I'm reading the book and it's not connecting at all. And I've learned to kind of like temper my feelings and say, you know what, like, don't feel down. Don't trash on this book. Don't trash it during. It's just not working out for you. Same with Kenobi shows. Like, hey, it's just not working. I think it's a very, very good practice to say, hey, maybe some things are just not for me, or maybe I just need to put them on the side and come back later, because every time you go into it and your hype level is over here, that's the worst, man, because you will always find something that's like, oh man, I wish this was done better.
Have you read the Ascendancy trilogy yet? The newest Thrawn trilogy?
No. I'm going in order. So I'm dealing with the first trilogy first, and then I'll go to Ascendancy.
Ascendancy, I have not finished. I own all of them on Audible. They're larger, which I actually really like. That excites me. But there's too much to read. I have not caught up. So I'll be curious to see what you think about those books when you make it. We did get a question that I just had to laugh at here. Was if you could see any speech in Star Wars as a Jedi, who do you choose? First of all, Ben, what would it be? Give us a good answer here.
Let me see. I gotta think. Hold on.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll pick the best answer here because we know where Giafet was going with this, right? Like we know Twi'lek. We get what he was saying. He's
He's a fan of talent. That's why.
Yeah, exactly. It's the. I think when George made Twi'leks, he was like, we just need kind of like a hot alien species, like because I've talked about this before. Have you ever noticed that like they made Twi'lek, like the men Twi'lek, like scary, like really sharp teeth. They file their teeth down. They're like really freaky, but like the female Twi'leks, like really like like they're really like that. It just cracks me up. I don't know why.
Big Fortuna used to freak me out when
I
was
know
he's freaky. That slimy, like who's that? He's like, oh man, I don't want to touch this guy.
And in the Lorna D audiobook, they talk about how she filed her teeth down, which was like something the men knew, but she wanted to look more fierce. And it just cracks me up every time. Like they always put the Twi'lek, like even in Book of Boba Fett, it's like I'm the pretty hostess character, and then it's like the men are like the freakiest, scariest looking aliens of the planet.
All right, I got my answer. You ready for this? Mm-hmm. So I want the Jedi that you don't judge by his sexy look, like Stellan Gius, or somebody who's like cute and innocent, like Ahsoka. I want somebody who's just despicable, ugly looking, and you only value him on the strength of character and his Jedi skills. So he's got to be a Gamorrean.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah,
fine, just like weird looking, and just has like his lightsaber, just goes in and he hacks shit, and then people like, but you know what? He's very benevolent. He's good at heart. He has very strong force skills. So we gotta appreciate. Like, I would love to see the tolerance level of like whether the Jedi would turn into a cancel culture. Like, nah, maybe not. You wouldn't be a good poster child for the Jedi, or would they embrace him?
I'll say one thing: whether you like the Book of Fett or not, the Gamorreans were great in that show. I thought they were great in that show. Fun. They were like one of the best. Like, I just love how they were portrayed. I liked everything about them in that show. That's funny. Good pick, Ben. I like that. That's a good pick. One day when Ben gets to direct his Star Wars episode in the anthology series, it'll be like a whole Gamorrean themed Jedi episode.
A Gamorrean army, a clan of Gamorrean Jedi.
The Gamorrean Wars, directed by Ben.
Right. Yeah.
Exciting indeed. Well, that is exciting stuff as far as, our taste in Jedi. You can see we have great species taste here. I would say as we kind of are closing down here, and we have some time to catch up on some of our Star Wars books like I'm doing now. Something Ben and I always talk about, feel free to take a breather, change things up, switch it up. I do find that when I'm forced to kind of read through something or crank it out, I'm less inclined to like it because there's this kind of weight of, I got to get this done, as opposed to if I just let myself breathe. And so I'm sad I don't have a Shadow of the Sith video out yet. I wish I did, but Jimmy and I just haven't had time. And in the past, over the last year, I've tried to rush books through just to get a review out for you guys. I end up liking them less. So I'm trying to change that this year and just let myself take time with it. If I start getting the books early one day, maybe that'll change when I have some time in advance.
Even where we are in our game in terms of like channel views, in the initial week, all these bigger channels, they just swallow up all of the attention. It's actually benefits your channel to say like, I'm going to release my review in a month. Because guess what? The book is still there in a month and it will be a new audience. Actually, my biggest video right now, which I released in the beginning of my channel a year or so, over a year ago, which was just book recommendations. People are still discovering it. And the books that I thought, I'm very behind on my High Republic reading.
Mm-hmm. You are.
And fans are still asking, hey, are you going to review this book? Or is this book worth buying? People are still discovering it.
It's a great point. Books age better in a lot of ways than shows.
Much better than the shows. Shows, you got to be quick on it.
That's exactly right. One more thing as we close out, guys. I'm a big fan of Displate. Got the Kenobi ones. Got my Batman ones over here. I saw these ones that came out recently. I just wanted to share. Before we leave, I have to share one more shameless merch plug. But these ones I thought were a lot of fun. We have what they've called this collection Duel of the Fates, which are just like iconic Star Wars like silhouettes of iconic fight scenes. You'll see like how cool is that? You could have
freaking dope.
Yeah.
You have a favorite one?
This is probably my favorite Duel of the Fates, right? The actual Duel of the Fates. But
which one? Point to it with
here, let me kind of pull it up here. Let me make it big.
Yeah.
Like, look at how great that is with the
Three
red,
pillars
white,
of
and blue.
light.
Oh, sorry, the
Oh
green.
man,
I
that
love
is
that one a
sick.
lot. I have to be honest with you. One of these days, I might have to pick up, one for the wall. I love the Mustafar one as well. The only problem I have this one is just thinking of it from like a wall art perspective. It's a lot. Like, it's not super legible, even though it's my favorite fight scene in the whole show.
Yeah. It's a little
It's
bit
just
small.
not super legible to me, so it'd be harder to put that. But they have some really cool ones. In particular, I really like this one of Coruscant with Mace Windu standing over. I don't know, my mouse is being weird. Standing over Palpatine, supposed to be like on the windowsill. Like, this
Yeah.
to me is kind of a dark, interesting one. I like this one quite a
Mhm.
bit. So there's a lot of really fun ones out there. I'll pull it up here big. I keep putting it up on the wrong window. You'll
It would be
see.
nice if they start doing custom ones where like you could supply your own
Oh
artwork.
man, that'd be fun. But
Yeah.
you see this Palpatine and Windu here on the edge of a building. I think that one's really fun.
Oh, no,
That's it.
no, that Muppet
That's
voice,
it.
dude.
And for Ben out there, I know which one Ben needs to get here as the sequel lover he is. This one right here with Kylo versus Luke.
Actually, I'm not the biggest fan of that fight.
I know, I'm not either.
I love the movie,
I'm not either.
Like when Luke was doing his like oh my god, Neo from Matrix.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah, I'm not a fan either.
God, get out of time.
And for all the memers out there, you can get your hello there, General Kenobi
Yeah.
Grievous one as well. Well, thank you guys for stopping by. It was a lot of fun. Wish Jimmy well. Give him a like on Twitter. Tell him I hope he's feeling better. Hopefully he'll be back with us next week. Hopefully you'll all be back next week and that you guys are enjoying all of your Star Wars books, shows, YouTubers, all of that. Thank you guys so much for being here. We'll be back again very soon. Until then, thanks for stopping by, guys.